First time ever. We say that a lot these days. Former President Bill Clinton deposed by a House committee on Jeffrey Epstein. Committee Democrats say, okay, President Trump should be next. U.S. diplomatic personnel who want to leave Israel to flee a possible war with Iran given the go-ahead. The Brits withdraw embassy staff from Tehran, and China tells its citizens to leave Iran as soon as possible. President Trump does the Texas two-step around a three-way Senate primary dividing MAGA. And Energy Secretary Chris Wright pumps but doesn't pay for gas. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. Turns out the Energy Secretary might have paid for some of that gasoline. Ed O'Keefe will catch us up on all the details about that in just a moment. But first, later this month, the Chappaqua Performing Arts Center in Westchester County, New York, will host tribute bands to Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles. Today and yesterday, that very same Performing Arts Center hosted depositions of former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Both were subpoenaed on a bipartisan basis by the House Oversight Committee to answer questions about their relationship and dealings, whatever they were, with Jeffrey Epstein. Former Clinton's appearance today marked the first in American history, first ever in an investigatory saga of this kind. Never before had a former president appeared as a subpoenaed witness before Congress. That precedent morphed even before questions were put to Clinton in a call from Democrats for President Trump to testify before that same committee. Because, as we all know, Trump knew Epstein too. How well and to what effect the Clintons and the Trumps with Epstein, all of that remains somewhat elusive and most certainly very hotly debated. But other and newly revealed associations with Epstein are cutting like a scythe through reputations and resumes. Yes, there's former Prince Andrew. Yes, there's former British ambassador to America, Peter Mandelson, both arrested and under investigation. But there are so many others. Borge Brende, the CEO of the World Economic Forum, resigned. Thomas Pritzker, former chairman of Hyatt Hotels, resigned. More resignations. James Staley, the CEO of Barclays. Catherine Rumler, general counsel at Goldman Sachs. Harvard professor and former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers. Add to that, Norway's former prime minister, Norway's current ambassador to Jordan and Iraq, the former chief of staff to British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, top flight academics, prominent lawyers, all now part of the Epstein undertow. Which brings me back to Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles, and two songs that, to my mind, lyrically encompass, though this was totally inadvertent, the essence of Epstein's network of power broker friends and the high-gloss sheen that obscured or deflected from the diabolical reality at the center of Epstein's criminally exploitive enterprise. From the Eagles, a song you might remember, Life in the Fast Lane. Let me quote, "Eager for action and hot for the game, the coming attraction, the drop of a name. They knew all the right people. They took all the right pills. They threw outrageous parties. They paid heavenly bills. Those bills are coming due now, feeling much less like heaven and much more like hell." And this from Fleetwood Mac's The Chain, also a song you might remember, about the revelations and the writhing now before us. Here are the lyrics. "Listen to the wind blow, down comes the night. Run in the shadows, damn the love, damn the lies. Break the silence, damn the dark, damn the light." The Clintons' testimony is over. We turn now to Nicole Killian to summarize that and to tell us where this all heads next. Nicole, take it away.
Hey, good to be with you, Major. It appears that this hearing may still be ongoing, but, we know there have been some starts and stops as they've taken breaks intermittently throughout the day. But what we do know, of course, both Democrats and Republicans acknowledge that the former president has been largely cooperative in this deposition, answering their questions. I actually talked to one member, ranking member Robert Garcia, about the former president's demeanor. Take a listen.
I think everybody would agree that he's been very cooperative, and he's actually answering the questions fairly, to the best of his ability. He has not taken a pass on pleading the fifth for any questions. He's been very thorough, He's been asked some questions multiple times over. I think you'll see that in the transcript. So he's been very cooperative, and in fact, I don't think he's given any sense that he's been uncomfortable to be there. In fact, I think he's been pretty interested in answering, I think, all the questions of both the Republicans and the Democrats.
Now, of course, going into this hearing, Chairman James Comer said that he had a lot of questions for the former president, particularly with respect to a number of photos that have surfaced in the Epstein files, most notably one with the former president in a hot tub with an unnamed woman. I'm told that is something that has come up in the context of this deposition. Also, of course, in the Epstein files, there is evidence of flight logs that the former president took several flights on Jeffrey Epstein's plane, although he previously had explained in a written statement to the committee that some of that was in part due to his work with the Clinton Global Initiative. So that being said, we also know that that has also been a topic that has come up, or did come up at least, in former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's deposition yesterday. We're obviously still waiting for those transcripts and video to be released, Major, but Chairman James Comer has pledged that that will be done as soon as possible.
And Nicole, let me pick up on that last point you just raised. Do we have any sense of timing, either on the availability for the public, the transcripts, or the full video of the depositions, either with former Secretary of State Clinton or former President Bill Clinton?
Well, the chair did indicate earlier today that he had hoped to make Hillary Clinton's deposition available, if not later today, perhaps tomorrow. Obviously, when these depositions go on, as long as they do, it does take some time for the committee to process that. But Democrats have been calling repeatedly for those depositions, in particular the one from Hillary Clinton yesterday, to be released within 24 hours and to be unedited. They have made that very clear. That is how this material should be put out. But again, we should eventually see this material, which both Democrats and Republicans should clarify the testimony that was given here both today and yesterday on the part of the former president and Secretary of State.
Nicole, super quickly, any new witnesses coming next that we are aware of?
Not that we are aware of, but, the chair has been asked multiple times about whether or not the committee intends to call Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary. Obviously, there were some new photos that surfaced and then were taken down and then came back up of him with Jeffrey Epstein and several other individuals. Of course, Lutnick has denied any wrongdoing. And just today, President Trump weighed in on that, because some of the Democrats here say they believe they have the votes to even issue a subpoena for Howard Lutnick to testify and appear before the panel. The president asked about that, saying that he believes Lutnick is innocent, that he is a good guy, but, if he wants to go, he can. Now, keep in mind, a formal request and subpoena has not been issued, but that certainly is on the radar of members of this committee, and Chairman Comer himself said it's something he'll look into.
Nicole Killian, thank you very much. U.S. and Iranian mediators are set for another round of negotiations over the country's nuclear program next week. But President Trump says he's not happy with how the talks have been going so far. Here is what he told our Nancy Cordes earlier today.
No, I'm not. I'm not happy with the fact that they're not willing to give us what we have to have. So I'm not thrilled with that. We'll see what happens. We're talking later. We'll have some additional talks today. But no, I'm not happy with the way they're going.
Charlie D'Agata joins us now from Tel Aviv. Charlie, I mentioned in the cold open to our program that the U.S. ambassador in Israel has said if you want to leave, leave today. The Brits have left or suggested to their personnel, get out of the embassy in Tehran. The Chinese have said to citizens there, get out as soon as possible. What's the larger atmosphere that all these things might or might not be signaling?
Well, Major, that was perfect timing, right? You just heard a commercial aircraft fly right overhead. The planes are still flying in and out of Israel and Tel Aviv. But today, notably, the U.S. Embassy here in Israel, they issued a security alert. And this is important, a new advisory, as you said earlier in the show, calling for the departure of non-emergency U.S. government personnel and their family members to leave the country, kind of granting that green light due to safety risks, saying, quote, persons wishing to leave or considering to leave Israel should do so today while commercial flights are available. And commercial flights are available today. The only commercial carrier that we know that is going to be canceling the flights, KLM, kind of important, the Dutch airline. That happens on Monday, I believe. And there are other airlines that have sort of been cautioning that this might happen. Again, as this increased tension is happening, the Italians are telling their citizens to leave Iran. The Brits and the French, as you said, possibly if you want to go to Israel, maybe it's not a great time for that. So kind of cranking up the tension, reflecting what's happening between the United States, the rising tension between the United States and Tehran, certainly here in Israel, but not like, we're not at DEFCON 5. It's just pay attention, and those American citizens who want to leave, now would be a good time, not necessarily because there's a sense of real urgency, because we don't feel that here, but possibly because these commercial flights are going to be harder to get in the coming days.
And Secretary of State Rubio heading there.
Yes. So he's supposed to arrive on Monday. Now, these things happen, and sometimes when we look at these meetings, if you look at the last time that President Trump in the United States bombed Iran during Operation Midnight Hammer, gave Iran a 2-week window to sort of comply to the demands, and 3 days later bombed Iran. So you look at some of the movements that are happening at a diplomatic level, but that doesn't necessarily suggest that any of those diplomatic motions that are going ahead, including talks that we understand are going to be taking place between the United States and Tehran in Vienna, technical talks, how they've been described, necessarily portend a pause in whatever this Trump administration may be planning, if they are planning some sort of military action inside Iran itself. And of course, we can assume that any of that activity inside Iran may include Israel, either the Israeli military itself in helping to launch those strikes, as has happened in the past, but certainly Israel will bear the brunt of an Iranian retaliation, and that they are certainly preparing for.
Charlie D'Agata from Tel Aviv, thank you very, very much. I'm going to turn now to Sam Vinograd, one of our very good friends on this program, who at times like this helps us understand and parse things. So, Sam, you've been a part of these conversations internally at high levels of U.S. government when there are advisories, or if people want to leave a certain sector, they're allowed to do so, maybe given some specific instructions. You've also watched as the map when other countries do the same thing. My listening audience, my watching audience may not understand what all that means. Help them understand what it might mean.
What it means is that governments around the world, including the U.S. government, are taking all necessary steps to protect their personnel prior to ostensibly U.S. military strike against Israel. Now in the private sector as a security analyst, when I look for those indicators that we're getting really close, Major, I look for exactly what we saw today and earlier this week. I look for governments moving what are called non-emergency personnel from their embassies in the region. The U.S. government did that with Lebanon and now Israel. These are people that are not essential to the functioning of the embassy. I look for other governments following suit. I look for travel advisories to American citizens and countries that say, hey, if you can get out, you should, because the security situation is anticipated to deteriorate. So we've checked those boxes now. But we're seeing some conflicting signals. Our colleague Margaret Brennan had truly a jaw-dropping interview with the Omani foreign minister that's going to air on Face the Nation, in which the Omani foreign minister said the talks are proceeding incredibly well because Iran is giving up its trump card.
I'm going to stop you right there because we have sound that we're going to play from that right now from the Omani foreign minister. Please listen and watch.
In my assessment of the way the talks are going, I think there is really, I can see that the peace deal is within our reach.
A peace deal?
Yes, is within our reach if we just allow diplomacy the space it needs to get there. Because I don't think any alternative to diplomacy is going to solve this problem.
What has Iran agreed to you that they have never done before? Can you give us any sense?
The single most important achievement, I believe, is the agreement that Iran will never, ever have a nuclear material that will create a bomb. This is, I think, a big achievement.
If it has been achieved, that would be very, very big indeed, because President Trump has said, in his own words, they need to say the magic words: we will never acquire the material to make a nuclear bomb.
If Iran has truly agreed.
Truly. We don't know. We don't know.
And certainly President Trump did express earlier today the fact that he was unhappy with how negotiations are going.
But this is not a random forum. Face the Nation is not a random forum. It is a place, if you want to make news and reveal what's going on, that is a place to do it. And that's indicative of something going on.
Well, the Omani foreign minister, in saying that Iran has agreed to give up, as we understand it, really the right to enrich uranium would be an existential shift for the Iranian regime. When you think about how the Iranian regime has not just held on to power, but projected influence around the world, it has been their nuclear program, in addition to, of course, their support for proxies and their missile program. Under the nuclear deal that Obama negotiated, the Iranians retained the capability to actually enrich uranium up to a certain low level, 3.67%, and in limited quantities. But they still had that capability. Now, if they no longer are holding on to that, that would be an existential shift for the regime and a major achievement if true.
And some of the things that would be on the minds of American negotiators: all right, get the centrifuges out, get the enriched uranium that is presently there out, and have all that verified. That would be details to come. That would be for the technical people. But this seems to me to be an important assertion from the Omani foreign minister, who is privy to a fair amount of this.
He is, and now it's up to, of course, we have the actual negotiators, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, who are working with the Omanis, but we also have the U.S. intelligence community, who behind the scenes, in my experience in these negotiations, would be providing the president and the negotiators with assessments of whether Iran actually was going to follow through on whatever they're promising. Right. And that is just as important as the face-to-face negotiations. And we actually just don't know what role the intelligence community is playing in assessing not just what Iran is saying, but what they actually mean.
Not so much trust, plenty of verification ahead.
Trust but verify.
Sam Vinograd, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Still to come, Republican Senator John Cornyn trying to survive a two-front primary challenge and then make it to a runoff. Top figures in Trump's inner circle all helping Senator Cornyn, but no endorsement from Trump himself. He's in Texas now, and we'll take you there. Also, the clash between AI powerhouse Anthropic and the Department of Defense. What's at stake? And what limits should govern AI surveillance and AI-directed weaponry? We will explore. Plus, two powerful New Yorkers in the Oval Office. The endlessly fascinating relationship, at least to us, between President Trump and New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to The Takeout. Let me direct your attention to a live shot we have from Corpus Christi, Texas. That's President Trump. As we mentioned, as we went to break, he's in Texas right before Tuesday's primary. He is promoting his economic and energy policies there. President has not endorsed in this primary, and there's no indication he's going to endorse in this primary. Our Ed O'Keefe joins us from Corpus Christi right now. There you are, Ed. Let's deal with the first thing we need to clean up. Did the Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, buy anyone their gallons or more of gasoline today? Yes or no?
Our understanding, Major, is that he did. In fact, he was buying so much gas that his own credit card was turned off by his bank, and he turned to an assistant secretary of energy and asked for hers. So, yes, they were pumping gas and paying for it today in Portland, Texas, which is just on the other side of the bridge. $2.59 a gallon there, 1 cent below the statewide average of $2.60 and below the $2.98 national average, which is down considerably since a recent high in June 22 of about $4.60, but up just in the last month or so, Major, in part because of concerns about what might transpire in Iran. We asked the Energy Secretary about that. Listen to his response. There is one administration policy being debated right now that could cause a spike again, and that is potential military action against Iran that would cause instability in that region and potentially disrupt production and distribution. So are you factoring for that or concerned at all that they could spike again?
Yeah, well, I think they're up a little bit right now based on that. But what's critical for this administration is that with American energy dominance and our alliance with other major producers in the world, that he can pursue a foreign policy that makes sense geostrategically and not, I can't do anything because it'll make gas prices go up. Look, do you want a nuclear-armed Iran, the largest sponsor of terrorism in the world, a huge troublemaker in the Middle East? Think of how the Middle East would prosper if we didn't have the threat, a looming threat of Iran over our head. So the president is all in to try to end the risk that Iran poses to the Middle East and to the broader world.
So if, and I emphasize if, we're in a situation in a month where something is up in Iran in terms of U.S. military engagement, but this Venezuelan oil is coming into the United States, where are gas prices?
Absolutely, it helps push gas prices down. More Venezuelan crude coming into the United States and flowing out of Venezuela helps keep gasoline and diesel prices down, whatever happens in the world.
People that are running, we don't even have the polls yet, but they're...
Energy analysts will dispute the secretary a little bit on that because OPEC producing nations, in fact, are going to meet this weekend to talk about potential to increase production ahead of any instability in Iran so as to not upset supply and not cause a big price spike. But the point he's making is essentially now that this Venezuelan crude is arriving and it's on that blue ship right there, Major, it's going to help replenish American supply and perhaps not disrupt it as much were there to be mass chaos and disruption in oil production across the Middle East.
Not a backdrop we would have expected 6 months ago, a Venezuelan tanker with Venezuelan oil right there in Corpus Christi. But get to the politics, Ed. Run my audience through this three-way Republican Senate primary and the tenterhooks that the Senate Republican leadership finds itself on and Senator John Cornyn finds himself on ahead of Tuesday's voting.
Just as we were coming back on the air, Major, he was finishing his litany of Republican officials who are here, and he name-checked all three who are on the ballot for that U.S. Senate seat next Tuesday on the Republican side. So Senator John Cornyn, who has served for 24 years, facing a two-pronged challenge, as you mentioned, from the Republican Attorney General, Ken Paxton, who is also here, and the Houston area Congressman Wesley Hunt. Cornyn flew here to Texas with the president on Air Force One because as the sitting senator, he's afforded that courtesy. Senator Ted Cruz was with him as well. He was asked a little while ago before this event began, have you endorsed? Why won't you endorse? He says, well, not going to, but I have made up my mind. But he refuses to say who exactly he'd support. Why not John Cornyn? He's been a relatively reliable vote for the president. Just didn't endorse him as quickly back in 2024 as Wesley Hunt did and as Ken Paxton did, but did come around, didn't vote for his impeachment. You know, has been a rather reliable acolyte, if you will. The issue is that Ken Paxton and Wesley Hunt are perhaps more aligned with the modern-day Texas Republican foot soldiers, the MAGA movement in this state. They've risen in the ranks since Trump 1 began. Whereas John Cornyn, who has served in public service for more than 40 years, is more of a Bush-era, go-along-to-get-along, compromise-style Republican that Wesley Hunt and Ken Paxton would argue is out of touch with Texas Republican values. So, first round of the primaries on Tuesday. Second round, if somebody doesn't win 50%, is in late May. As you mentioned, Senate Republicans have been spending big money against Ken Paxton and Wesley Hunt to try to suppress their support and hope that Cornyn could either eke it out on Tuesday night or face one of them in that runoff. But it would be an expensive prospect at a time when Democrats are considering James Tallarico and Jasmine Crockett. And polling suggests no matter which Republican emerges, at least Tallarico would have a fighting shot at taking back a Senate seat that Democrats have not won in this state, Major, since LBJ was in the Senate. And a Democrat hasn't served in Texas, in a Texas Senate seat, since 1988. You know this, when Lloyd Benson was reelected the same night he was rejected as Michael Dukakis' running mate.
Ed O'Keefe, covering all the bases for us in Corpus Christi, Texas. My appreciation to you, sir. Thank you so much. We will have special coverage of the Texas primary as well as the other events on Tuesday night, starting at 9 p.m. Eastern. I will be anchoring, that's pretty good news, I think, right here on CBS News 24/7. An AI giant, and I mean giant, says no deal, and the president responds angrily. We will take a look at the fallout between Anthropic and the Department of Defense with former Secretary of the Air Force, Frank Kendall. He's an important voice on this. You're going to want to hear from him. That's next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Thanks for hanging out with us. Here is a look at what else we and now you are watching this evening. CBS News has learned the Federal Reserve has started a closed-door fight to block Justice Department subpoenas aimed at Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. Powell, as you might remember, was subpoenaed in January, 6 months after Senate testimony that he gave about a renovation project at Federal Reserve headquarters. Sources tell CBS News the Fed is asking a judge to quash those subpoenas. The legal grounds for that argument, though, have not yet been revealed. Attorney General Mamdani has announced 30 more indictments over an anti-immigration enforcement protest at a Minnesota church last month. 25 people have already been arrested, accused of violating the worshipers' civil rights. The original 9 defendants in that case included journalist Don Lemon. All have pled not guilty. During the immigration crackdown in Minnesota, Renee Good died at the hands of a federal agent, sparking intense scrutiny and widening protests in that city. Now, almost 2 months after her fatal shooting, Renee Good's family is speaking out. Here is part of their conversation with our chief correspondent, Matt Gutman.
As her dad, my first instinct, I would trade 1,000 times stepping in front of her to protect her.
You would take those bullets?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
1,000 times.
We all would.
Yeah, we all
Everybody would.
Easily.
And not to
Without
be able
question.
to protect her is a hard thing. But that was my first thought.
That you weren't there to protect her?
Yeah, you can't do that. You know, you raise your kids, you send them into the world with the best tools you can. And I would do it today to protect her.
You can see more of that conversation tonight on the CBS Evening News. The deadline for artificial intelligence company Anthropic to meet the Pentagon's demands to allow unrestricted AI access have come and gone. No deal. The company had been awarded a $200 million contract last year, but in recent weeks had refused to help conduct mass surveillance or carry out military operations without at least some protections or protocols. The Pentagon has vowed to designate the startup as something known as a supply chain risk. Frank Kendall joins me now. He was Secretary of the Air Force during the Biden administration. Frank, I'm glad to have you with us. I want to read to you something I know you've seen, but my audience might not have. Something the president posted just a short time ago on Truth Social. Control room, please bring that up so I can read it off the monitor, please. The left-wing nut jobs at Anthropic have made a disastrous mistake trying to strong-arm the Department of War and force them to obey their terms of service instead of our Constitution. Their selfishness is putting American lives at risk. That Truth Social post, as you know, Frank, goes on to say the president wants to terminate all government contracts with Anthropic, essentially ending its relationship with the federal government. I'd like your response.
Well, first of all, it's really important to understand that this is at its heart a contract dispute between a contractor and the government. You know, the government wants to have language or will accept language that says that the software can't be used for any unlawful use, which should be enough. Anthropic wants more than that. And this is a change, I think, to their current situation. They want prohibitions against wide area surveillance against Americans and use of their software for autonomous lethal engagements without any humans involved. The government is already bound not to do those things. It has policies in terms of autonomous weapons are used, and there are laws against unauthorized surveillance of Americans. Now, I'm sympathetic to the government's point of view on this, but the reaction, as you saw from President Trump, is really over the top and outrageous. It goes way beyond the confines of this specific dispute and could be an existential threat to Anthropic's existence as a company. So what was a negotiation that was going on for some time, and that's the way this should have been resolved, is now being fought out in public by outrageous statements being made by the president to try to characterize Anthropic in a certain way.
You write in a New York Times op-ed about artificial intelligence and its future potential influence on warfighting. Let me quote from that. AI is poised to be the most transformative technology of our generation, perhaps of any generation. And we need to ensure the government and the private enterprise that develop these technologies have a constructive and mutually beneficial relationship consistent with American values. I think most people reading that would agree It sounds like that's gone off the rails this afternoon.
It has, and the dangers of this technology are pretty significant. There are going to be major impacts on the economy and on the workplace. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs ultimately, and the technology is accelerating. It's moving forward very, very rapidly. Its use in wartime is a great concern. Its use by the military is a great concern. So we need to work together to put reasonable bounds, again, that are consistent with our values on how this is done. But the approach Anthropic is taking is not going to get us there. That's not really the right way to address this. And the approach the government is taking, which is, again, over the top, and you taking a sledgehammer to what should be a relatively small problem that could be worked out, not the right way to approach it either.
This is not, to use software terminology, a plug-and-play situation. Anthropic and Maven is their, I don't know the proper phraseology you do, Frank, but Maven is what they have that interfaces with the Pentagon, as I understand it now, and it's deeply interfaced, embedded there. We just can't pull one thing out and put another thing in, is what I'm trying to get at awkwardly.
Yeah, the president talked about a 6-month transition period. There are other companies that are trying to develop and are close, I think, to having similar capabilities, maybe not quite as good as Anthropic's Claude, the name of their system. So the government doesn't want to lose all this capability until it can transition to something else. And I don't know that Anthropic's going to fight the government on that and stop. They're under contract now. And the government could take, under the Defense Production Act, could attempt to, force Anthropic to continue to do business with it until it had an alternative. And that was one of the things the government was threatening to do here.
Frank, this seems to me to be an enormously important threshold moment for not only the Pentagon, but the development of artificial intelligence and our approach to any future military risk or deployed asset to counter a risk.
I agree. Look, what I argue in my piece that I wrote is that we need to start looking at regulation of artificial intelligence products like we do other products. That's going to be hard to do. There have been some proposals put on the table for how to do that. Consequences that come from those products, going to assert who's liable for those and how they came about, and try to put some basic constraints in place. This administration has refused to do that, basically, and it's even gone after the states who tried to do that with state governments. I think that the Congress needs to step up here. It needs to come up and say, okay, we need to figure out how we're going to regulate this, not just for military uses, but for other uses as well. This is technology which is enormously powerful. It can be powerful in many ways, cybersecurity, military uses, invasions of privacy, on and on. And we need to start thinking about that very deeply and figuring out how we're going to regulate it.
Congress, pay attention. This is a big deal. Frank Kendall, former Air Force Secretary, I appreciate your time very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Prescription platform online with the president's signature. He's even got his name. But who really is Trump RX for, and how does it fit into the larger U.S. healthcare system? We will explore that. When we come back, this is The Takeout. Welcome to The Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. And welcome to my San Diego chicken socks. They're really great. I hope you love them as much as I do. Might have missed it during Tuesday's very long State of the Union address, but there was a brief mention. President Trump invoked his new cash-only online drug platform called Trump RX. There you can find discounted generic prescriptions from about 43 medications overall. John Stanford is here to talk to us about that from Charlotte. Why? Well, he's executive director at the venture capital firm Incubate, where he focuses on prescription drugs. John, I'm very glad to have you with us. Just for my audience's benefit, give me your point of view on this. You're not in a think tank. You're not a member of Congress. You don't regulate this. How do you approach this prescription drug market? And secondarily, how do you evaluate what is good or maybe not so good about Trump RX?
Well, Major, thanks for having me on. Venture capital is the lifeblood of the early stage biotech ecosystem. It's too risky for anyone else to touch it. So myself and our colleagues, we're here to work with entrepreneurs to bring new medicines forward. And it takes about $3 billion in about 15 years. So we're in it for the long game. And I'd say over the last 5 years or so, beyond the science, we have to pay attention to what Washington is doing and how we're talking about prescription drugs and, frankly, our broken healthcare system overall. So we were all ears to many things that President Trump said because water flows or capital flows like water. And if policy barriers are in the way, we're going to invest somewhere else.
Got it. What about Trump RX?
Well, I think Trump RX, it's one of many cash payment platforms. And we're excited to see the president bringing his bully pulpit to let people know that there are alternative ways to access medicines that can be transformative for people's lives. But what we didn't hear out of the Trump RX conversation is why we have to have this conversation. Why is it that people with health insurance have to be considering cash alternatives? And it's because insurance just isn't insurance anymore. We've got deductibles that are $20,000 for a family of 4. We've got people, when they get a prescription from their doctor, they're on the hook for the first $500, $1,000, $1,500, things Americans can't afford. So we have this incredible set of medicines that can transform people's lives. Trump RX is one platform that might help people pay cash to get them, but we shouldn't be having that conversation. We should be having a conversation about health insurance reform, and that was missing in the president's speech.
You also talked about the importance of capital flows. What will capital flows do in response to the other thing President Trump regularly touts, which is most favored nation status for drug prices, essentially bringing prices in America down to European levels?
Well, we don't have to hypothesize on this one. We learned late in the Biden administration what happens when you put price controls in this area. The money goes somewhere else. For example, pills were created under the Biden system to be less valuable than biologics. What did we immediately see? We saw venture capital move all of their money into biologics. So we understand what most favored nation is trying to accomplish, but it's the wrong solution to a much broader conversation about why Americans can't access their drugs. And notably, President Biden didn't see the pickup under his price controls that I think President Trump would be hoping for with most favored nation. So it may not be a political winner, but we know for certain that it's a loser for American competitiveness. Our venture capital will go somewhere else if we bring in European-style price controls. Europe learned this lesson. Japan learned this lesson. We know that if we want America to be the front line of the world's medicine cabinet, then we've got to keep our VCs investing here.
John Stafford, I appreciate the perspective. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Major.
Another trip to D.C. for New York Mayor Zoran Mamdani. Our political panel joins us to there you see the picture. One that's a 75, a real one from today, not so real. Anyway, they'll be here to talk about that and lots of other politics stuff this week. Takeout returns shortly. Welcome back to Takeout, political panel time. Let me introduce Democratic strategist Lori Watkins, Republican strategist Mark Bednar. Great to have you both here. So Zoran Mamdani and the president hung out again. And all week in New York, there's been this internet conversation about the snowball fight and the police are really upset about that. I was so waiting for the president to jump on that, but he didn't. He keeps giving Zoran Mamdani a lot of free passes. How do you assess that?
Well, hanging out, I think, is a really great way to put it. Like that's part of the Trump coalition. You're expanding, into unlikely opportunities, unlikely alliances, and I think it's really kind of putting to rest, at least for now, kind of the predictions, the sugar rush at the time when a lot of Republicans predicted that Mamdani is going to be the face of Republican attack ads in the fall.
Right.
And I think
that sort of died down, hasn't it?
Immediately. And if you're a Republican-leaning voter who's not sure if you're going to jump in the midterms, if you know who Mamdani is, you're already coming out to vote.
Right.
And so I think that this is an opportunity for the president. It's an opportunity for the country. It's an opportunity for New York. And so we'll see where it goes.
Lori?
So when you saw Mamdani call him a builder, right? Trump, okay. A builder. I thought this was a masterclass in being able to take a person with narcissistic tendencies and use narcissistic fluffing to be able to turn that interaction around to get what you want. He got him to agree to release an ICE-detained victim from a center. Right, exactly. And he also cajoled him into supporting $21 billion towards a 12,000 apartment unit housing project in Queens. So I would say that Mamdani had more of a win than Donald Trump did.
And it probably didn't hurt to talk about Queens with President Trump.
Right, but he is a builder, though.
He was born. Right. So we like to remember on the show things that are said that are meaningful at a time in the future. And we have a classic incident of that. In December, NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman was here, and we talked about his ambitious plans to send U.S. astronauts to the moon. Listen what he said in December. 2028, United States astronauts back on the moon. Is that aspirational or a guarantee?
Oh, I'm looking to pull those timelines in. You know, the president says we got to return American astronauts by 2028, but we're just months away from sending American astronauts around the moon for the first time in more than a half a century. We're going to do everything we can to pull in those timelines.
Your host was onto something aspirational, because it was an aspiration, but it's not going to be realized. NASA announced that today. Here's part of what the administrator said about what is going to happen instead.
We're gonna rightfully put our energy towards Artemis 2. There's a lot to learn from that. Believe it or not, the experiences of that crew, what they learn, what they may find, could inform the crew we select for Artemis 3. So we're going to focus on Artemis 2. We're going to get that crew back safely. We're going to learn from it, and then we're going to move on to Artemis 3.
Artemis 2 is a low Earth orbit around the Earth to test some things out before sending them to go around the moon in orbit, come back, before going there to land. My only point about all this is you can be gung-ho and you can have Trump time, but there are realities and there are safety checks, and you don't want to foul this up.
Of course. And but how refreshing is it that we have an administration that is aspirational and ambitious while also being realistic? Juxtapose that with, when we had astronauts languishing in space for months in the previous administration. So now that we're getting
at the International Space Station.
Right. But so now that we're getting back on with our right footing, and you want to bunch up these missions so that you have better certainty, better frequency in a shorter amount of time rather than spacing them out. It's a good idea.
Yeah. But Laura, even when last December, the reason I asked that question was plenty of scientists were saying, you're not going to make it. It's not ready.
No, and what is very interesting to me, and I don't understand, I worked on the commercialization of space in the Obama administration, and I don't know why they're using more than 20-year-old technology on the Artemis when DOGE efficiency, for example, right? Where's that come into play? Did you know that Speaker Johnson invited all 4 of those crew members to the State of the Union the other night? And notice that President Trump didn't speak about that mission once. All he talked about was Space Force and the fact that it costs $4.1 billion for one mission to land on the moon. When we can do that, half the cost, it's much more safer, it's much more efficient, and it's going to cost a lot less. And I don't know why they're choosing to go this route. I don't know, maybe there's contracts being handed out, but if I was a member of Congress, I would haul Isaacman in front of Congress and ask him to enlighten us on this. He's managing this program. Why is there all these delays? Why is it costing so much? And why are you choosing to use horse and buggy type technology when we're in the steam engine era here? It doesn't make sense.
30 seconds to respond to that.
It's space, getting back to the moon. It's worth getting it right. Like President Trump, he wants to put on a show. He wants to display, America's might for the whole world. And
he wants to go to Mars.
And he wants to go to Mars, right? So it's worth getting right. And so if there's a slight delay, and make sure that we have an excellent mission, it's worthwhile.
But to Lori's point, now we know why there was no mention of it in the State of the Union, because they knew this was coming. They probably got some internal flags.
That it wasn't going to work. I'm on emails, okay, Major, and I get these from Artemis is Lockheed Martin, right? I get emails that go into details about safety issues.
Lori, that's going to have to be it. Lori Watkins, great to have you here. Thanks so much. Mark Bednar, also great to have you here. Thank you very much. Happy Friday, everyone. You know what this is. Quick reminder, the Takeout. You know what we are. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. The Daily Report, coming your way next.